The operating theater aboard the interspecies medical vessel Yeltrax 9 was silent but for the low hum of sterilization fields and the rhythmic beeping of an oxygen monitor. The patient lay still, his right leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood soaked into the synthetic padding of the emergency bed. His name was Grant Galven, a maintenance specialist from Earth, and his femur was fractured in 2 places. Dr. Rilu, the assigned trauma physician, stood over him, 3 of his 6 yellow eyes narrowing as he reviewed the scan overlays. The fracture was severe, the surrounding muscle tissue inflamed and torn. Internal bleeding was present, though minor. Rilu had treated worse, but not on a Terran, and certainly not one who had insisted on walking 3 steps to the stretcher after the injury. "Your leg is broken," Rilu said, gesturing to the holographic scan that hovered above Grant's body. Grant grimaced. "Yeah, I figured. Had a similar break when I was 17. This one's nastier, though." "You remained conscious during the incident?" "Sadly." Rilu tapped a control panel, adjusting the sedation levels. "You should be unconscious. The pain from this class of injury exceeds tolerance thresholds in at least 9 of the 11 species we treat regularly." "Well, I'm not one of those, am I?" Grant said, pressing his head back against the pillow. Sweat beaded on his forehead and his knuckles were white from gripping the bed rails. Rilla turned to the assistant medic, a tall, willow-limbed Saraxi named Fen, and spoke in a low tone. "He should be screaming." Fen's head tilted. "Do humans suppress vocal responses to trauma?" "I don't know," Rilla muttered. "I've read the literature, but none of it explains this." Grant raised a hand. "Hey, Doc, if you're wondering why I'm not howling like a banshee, it's because I'm focusing on not passing out. And I don't want to give the big guy over there any reason to drop me again." Fen stiffened, his long arms folding across his chest. "I did not drop you. You jolted the stretcher," Grant said. "It counts." Rilla returned his attention to the control panel. "We'll need to administer a bone-setting agent, followed by surgical stabilization. But first, sedation." "Hold up," Grant said, lifting a trembling hand. "Can we skip general anesthesia? Last time I went under, I woke up thinking I was in a bear trap." "You are in a bear trap," Rilu said, pointing to the scan. "A biological one." Grant chuckled weakly. "See? Even you're getting the hang of human humor." Rilu blinked. "That was not a joke." The procedure began with a local nerve block. Grant flinched as the injector hissed against his thigh, but said nothing. Rilu watched closely, waiting for the inevitable cry of pain. It never came. Instead, Grant stared at the ceiling and began humming something off-key. "Is that a mating call?" Fen asked, puzzled. "It's a song," Grant replied. "Helps distract me." "You are distracting us." "Well, Doc, you're real charming, but I'm trying not to die from pain over here." Rilla paused mid-injection. "You are at no risk of death." "Feels like it," Grant said. "I mean, I get it. You've got scanners and monitors and 6 eyes, but I've got pain." The surgical tools were activated miniature manipulators that entered through microscopic incisions to realign the bone fragments. Grant's jaw clenched. His hands trembled. One of the monitors spiked. Yet he never made a sound. Rilu leaned over. "You are experiencing significant discomfort." "No kidding. Why are you not reacting as expected?" Grant gave a strained smile. "Because if I scream, I might lose control and kick someone. And I only have one good leg left." Fen glanced at Rilu. "We should restrain him." "I'm kidding," Grant said. "Mostly." Rilu pulled up the pain index scale used for Terran physiology. It was already maxed out. "Do you want to describe your pain level?" Rilu asked. "On a scale of 1 to 10? Grant said. "Probably a solid golf cart full of angry bees." "That is not a number." "Exactly." The surgery took 40 minutes. Grant made 2 jokes about pudding, one about his ex-girlfriend, and a brief pun involving femurs and humor. Rilu ignored most of it, assuming it was a form of delirium. But when the procedure ended and the bone was stabilized, Grant's vitals remained steady, impressively so. Back in the recovery unit, Rilu sat beside the bed, reviewing his notes. Grant lay still, a compress wrapped around his thigh and a dull orange glow pulsing from the healing brace secured over his leg. "Do you wish to rest now?" Rilu asked. "I'll rest when I'm not afraid of farting in my sleep and accidentally triggering one of your fire suppression systems. That scenario is impossible." "You say that now," Grant muttered. Rilu tilted his head. "You are still in pain?" "Yeah, but you continue to make these statements." "Jokes, Doc. They're jokes. They serve no medical purpose. Maybe not to you, but they help. Laughter kicks in the brain's pain blockers. That is not in your medical file." "Well, maybe your database needs an update." Rilu stared at him. "You are using humor to manage your pain?" "Exactly." Rilu turned to his notes again, tapping rapidly. "Fascinating." An alert chimed. Another patient had arrived, this one a Sornian with a dislocated thoracic joint. Fen left to assist. Rilu remained, watching Grant drift into a light sleep. The next day, Grant's vitals were steady, but the pain had returned in full force. Rilu offered a mild sedative, but Grant refused. "Too groggy," he said. "I want my mind sharp in case I need to make fun of someone." "Why do you persist with this behavior?" "Because it works. Look, Doc, pain sucks. But if I let it own me, I won't get better. So I laugh. I make jokes. It's like yelling back at a thunderstorm." Rilu didn't fully understand, but he logged the information and began a quiet study of Terran humor as a secondary mechanism for pain management. Over the next 72 hours, Grant's healing progressed within expected parameters. He was compliant with therapy, though he groaned through every stretch and cursed the resistance bands. His jokes continued, sometimes clever, sometimes terrible, but always timed with the most painful moments. During one therapy session, Rilu observed as Grant attempted to lift his leg off the bed. The effort caused a visible tremor in his muscles. "Don't you dare cry," Grant muttered to himself. "You're not crying in front of the alien with 6 eyes. I can detect tear ducts." "Then look away." Rilu stepped forward. "You may rest now." Grant nodded, breathing hard. "Thanks." That was today's attempt not to scream session. "Your resilience is notable." Grant looked up at him. "It's not resilience, Doc. It's stubbornness and sarcasm, with a side of spite." That night, Rilu reviewed centuries of Terran comedic history. He watched stand-up routines, sitcoms, wartime satire, and late-night banter. He still didn't fully understand the appeal, but he saw the pattern humor used as a shield, a weapon, a bomb. It wasn't just distraction. It was defiance. He returned to Grant's room the next morning with a small device. "This is a neural stimulator," Rilu said. "It mimics the brain's laughter response. I wish to test it." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like cheating." "Perhaps." Rilu activated the device. A low pulse hummed through the room. Grant giggled. "Oh no," he said. "You've made me laugh at my own thoughts. This is dangerous." The stimulator remained active for 3 minutes. When it was done, Grant's pain levels had dropped by 15%. Rilu documented everything. "You may be onto something," Grant said, sighing. "But I still prefer doing it the old-fashioned way." "Jokes?" "Yep." Rilu nodded once. "Then teach me." Rilu arrived at the rehabilitation chamber precisely 8 planetary rotations after Grant's surgery. He found the human seated awkwardly on a padded incline bench, his injured leg braced and elevated by a support structure that whirred softly to adjust for swelling. Grant was attempting to open a packet of nutritional paste with his teeth. "You may ask for assistance," Rilu said, stepping inside. Grant looked up, squinting as if trying to determine whether the alien physician was serious or sarcastic. "You ever tried these things? They're sealed like the universe is gonna collapse if someone gets a whiff of chicken-flavored protein. I have not consumed Terran nutritional paste." "You're missing out," Grant said, finally tearing the corner with a victory grunt. "It's like someone made regret into a pudding." Rilu ignored the comment and activated the wall display, pulling up Grant's recovery data. Muscle response in the injured leg had begun to return, though coordination remained poor. The implanted stabilizers were functioning without issue. What concerned Rilu was the patient's refusal to accept stronger analgesics despite evidence of continuous discomfort. "We are scheduled to begin assisted flexion today," Rilla said, adjusting the display to show a projected motion arc. "You will experience strain." "Understood. You will not suppress the pain instinctively?" "I'll suppress it on purpose." "Why?" "Because I need to know where the pain starts and ends. If I numb it completely, I might push too far and tear something. That is not a standard approach." "It is for me." Rilla paused, then turned to the console near the bench. He summoned a therapy drone from the ceiling unit. It lowered with a soft hiss, unfolding its arms with mechanical grace. "Do not attempt to joke while the drone is active," Rilla said. "Its sensors are literal." "Noted. No sarcasm near the murder Roomba." The drone latched onto the brace's connection points and began a slow, deliberate flexion of Grant's knee. His face tensed immediately, jaw locked, eyes unfocused. He didn't speak. Rilu watched closely. "Describe the sensation," Rilu said. "Unpleasant," Grant muttered. "Like someone's wringing out a wet towel made of nerves." "Is the movement tolerable?" "Barely. Keep going." The drone continued, extending the leg to 30 degrees before retracting. The process repeated twice, and by the third cycle, sweat gathered at Grant's temples. Rilu stepped closer. "Your pulse is elevated." "Yeah, Doc. Because it hurts." "You may signal for pause." "I won't." Rilu considered this. "You are not in competition with yourself. Recovery is not a contest. Try telling that to the part of my brain that thinks walking again should have happened yesterday." The fourth cycle began. Grant exhaled sharply, gripping the bench frame. Still, no cry, no protest. The only sound was the mechanism's steady rhythm and the faint grind of metallic joints adjusting. Rilla deactivated the drone after the sixth repetition. Grant didn't move, just lay back, panting quietly. "You may rest," Rilla said. Grant nodded. "Appreciate it." There was a long pause. Rilla reviewed the captured neurofeedback. Pain reception was high. Emotional distress minimal. The brain patterns were oddly synchronized. "You were channeling your pain into controlled thought," Rilla said. "Yeah. I picture something worse." "Explain." "I think about the time I got stung by 3 jellyfish and passed out in a kayak. Makes this feel manageable." Rilla tilted his head. "You use past trauma to reframe current injury?" "Pretty much." "That is not a healthy strategy." "Well, it works. Healthy's a luxury. Functional's the goal." The lights dimmed briefly as the station's external shielding adjusted to a nearby solar flare. The hum of the life systems deepened for a moment, then stabilized. Grant sat up slowly, brushing sweat from his brow. "How long till I can put weight on it?" "Another 4 rotations, minimum." "Fine. Give me something to do." "You are already undergoing recovery." "I mean mentally. I'm bored out of my skull, Doc." Rilla considered this. "You may assist in recalibrating the therapy drone." Grant blinked. "You're letting me mess with your medical equipment?" "You are an engineer. I'm also on painkillers." "You refused them." "Fair." Rilu activated the drone's maintenance panel and projected a schematic onto the wall. "The torque regulator is misaligned. Your assistance will be monitored." They worked in silence for a while. Grant's hands moved with practiced confidence, even as he winced every time he shifted his leg. Rilu watched his concentration, noting how the human's face relaxed when absorbed in a task. "You are calmer when engaged mechanically," Rilu observed. "It's how I think best. You redirect your focus entirely." "Exactly. Pain makes a lot of noise. Fixing things drowns it out." Rilla filed the notes silently. 2 rotations later, the rehabilitation moved to upright support. Grant stood with the help of a gravity modulator and a stabilizing frame. His leg trembled, but he remained upright for over 5 minutes before sinking back into the chair. "That's the least satisfying victory lap I've ever taken," he muttered. "You remained vertical. That is sufficient. Tell that to my dignity." Rilla gestured to the console. "You may review the footage if you wish. For analysis. Or blackmail. I have no use for leverage." then you're wasting a gold mine. Later that cycle, Rilla introduced a new element, controlled exposure to simulated environments. The chamber transformed into a holographic projection of uneven terrain, rocks, slopes, narrow ridges. Grant's task was to navigate 20 paces forward using a guided exosupport. The first attempt ended with a stumble and a loud curse. "You may retry," Rilla said from the observation booth. "I'm gonna sue that hill. It is not a legal entity. Then I'll insult its geological ancestry." By the third attempt, Grant managed the full distance. His breathing was strained, and the leg brace's sensors flashed warnings, but he remained upright. Rilu met him at the end of the path. "You are exceeding expected progression. I'm stubborn. I have categorized that trait already." They sat briefly on the simulated ridge. The projection cast an artificial sunset, painting their faces in shifting amber light. "Doc," Grant said, studying the fake horizon, "you ever treated a human with chronic pain?" "No." "Then you should know some of us live with it every day. No accident. No surgery. Just constant. You learn to live around it. Build routines. Tricks. Jokes. Whatever gets you through." "I see. It's not about being tough. It's about not letting it define you." Rilla filed that too. The next morning, Grant requested a personal modification to his brace. Rilla watched as the human carefully etched a design onto the outer casing using a micro-engraver. "What are you doing?" "Adding motivation." When finished, the brace bore a crude image of a turtle holding a wrench. Below it read, "Slow fixer's still a fixer." Rilu said nothing, but later replicated the image into his records. The last rehabilitation cycle involved full weight-bearing movement. Fen returned to assist, though he kept a healthy distance from Grant's recovering leg. "You may begin when ready," Rilu said. Grant took a breath, then stepped forward, unsupported. His gait was uneven. The pain was visible in the tightening of his shoulders. But he walked 5 steps, then 10. He turned slowly and came back. "I'm walking like a drunk crab," he said, leaning against the wall. "You are walking," Rilla corrected. Grant gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I am." Rilla closed the session. "You have achieved functional recovery. You will be discharged tomorrow." Grant didn't reply immediately. He stared at the floor, then at the brace. "You ever get patients who teach you something, Doc?" "Occasionally. Then I hope I'm not the weirdest one." "You are." Grant laughed. "Fair." Rilla turned to leave, but paused. "Would you consider contributing to a medical journal entry?" "Only if I get to title it." "What would you call it?" "Laughing Through the Limp." Rilu considered this. "Acceptable." Grant sat back, exhaling slowly. "You know, document. For a 6-eyed alien who doesn't laugh, you're not half bad company. And for a structurally compromised mammal, you are unusually durable." They didn't shake hands, but the silence that followed was as close to camaraderie as either of them needed. The rehabilitation wing of Yeltrax 9 was quieter now. Grant sat sideways on the medbench, his formerly broken leg fully extended and wrapped in a final stage support sleeve made of translucent polymer. The brace no longer buzzed or pulsed, the healing process was complete. Only the soreness remained like a fading echo. Rilu entered carrying a slim data tablet. His movements were unhurried, almost contemplative. He stopped a few steps from the bench, his lower arms folded behind his back. "You are due for final discharge. One more diagnostic and then you will be cleared for return to your assigned vessel." Grant nodded, rolling his ankle experimentally. "Didn't expect I'd miss this place." "You disliked every meal, insulted the therapy drone, and reprogrammed a sanitation unit to play music when idle." "I said didn't expect it. Doesn't mean I won't. You have been an anomaly." "Story of my life." Rilla tapped the tablet. "Your bone density has increased by 4% beyond baseline. That is unusual. Calcium supplements. Also, I've been stress eating dried cheese cubes. That would not account for structural reinforcement." Grant shrugged. "Maybe I'm evolving into a cheese-based life form." Rilu ignored that. He extended a small sensor toward Grant's leg. Hold still. The blue light swept down the limb, flickering as it passed the knee joint. The screen displayed a full schematic of skeletal alignment and muscular recovery, all within optimal margins. Grant watched the reading, then leaned back on his hands. So I'm good to go? You are structurally stable. There are no remaining traces of internal trauma. Physically, maybe. Psychological analysis is optional for Terran personnel. I wasn't fishing, just saying injuries linger in weird places. Sometimes, even after the limp's gone, your brain still walks like it's broken. Phantom pain. More like phantom hesitation. Rilu placed the scanner back on the tray. That is not documented in your records. It wouldn't be. That kind of thing doesn't show up on a chart. Outside the chamber window, the stars shifted slightly as the station rotated. The ambient light dimmed by a fraction, signaling the start of the rest cycle for most of the crew. The silence that followed did not feel empty. Grant rubbed his thigh absently. I met a guy once who lost both legs in a reactor blowout. They gave him synthetics top of the line. Could jump higher than anyone else on the ship. But he still limped. Why? He said it felt dishonest not to. That is illogical. You'd think. But pain's not always about logic. Sometimes it's about memory. Or defiance. Rilu considered that. Grant stood slowly, testing his balance. No tremor. No shift. His weight distributed evenly. He took 2 steps without support, then paced the length of the chamber and back. When he paused, Rilu was still watching him. You are no longer in pain? Not the kind you can scan for. You continue to use metaphor instead of direct description. Because metaphors make it easier to explain without sounding like a malfunctioning toaster. That would be an auditory issue. Exactly. Rilu hesitated, then turned to the console. There is one final protocol. Grant raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, a surprise sprint through a minefield? No. A simulation. For final cognitive stress assessment. You're checking if I break under pressure? Not precisely. We are testing your ability to respond to high-stress stimuli without reactivating trauma pathways. Huh. So like a mental fire drill. Yes. Grant followed Rilu into the adjacent chamber. It was smaller, circular, and lined with hollow emitters along the walls and floor. A half-sphere of translucent shielding lowered over the entryway once they were inside. Rilu keyed in a sequence. This simulation will recreate the original incident, your accident. We have reconstructed the maintenance corridor, the equipment failure, and the pressure search. You may terminate the sequence at any time. Grant let out a long breath. All right, let's do it. The room shimmered. In an instant, he stood again in the narrow service tunnel of the freighter he'd been repairing before the injury. The air smelled of ionized metal and ozone. Overhead, the flickering lights cast long shadows. The bulkhead panel looked exactly as it had half-secured, with one exposed conduit humming louder than it should. He crouched, inspecting the panel, and reached for the same multi-tool he'd used that day. This time, he didn't touch the conduit. Instead, he stood, stepped away, and activated the emergency override on the wall, a command he'd overlooked originally in his rush to finish repairs. The panel hissed and shut down cleanly. Grant exhaled. The simulation faded, leaving him once again in the sterile chamber. Rilu tapped the console. You did not repeat the action that caused your injury. I remembered the override. You did not during the initial incident. That's the thing about pain, it teaches you to look twice. Rilu nodded slowly. You were cleared for duty. Grant rolled his shoulder. Not gonna lie, Doc, for a 6-eyed alien, you're okay. You already said that. No, last time I said you weren't half bad company. Different compliment. Noted. They left the simulator together. Outside, the corridors were dimmed for cycle rest, but a few personnel moved quietly between stations. Grant glanced down the hall leading toward the transport dock. I guess this is goodbye. You will not return? Hopefully not for injury. Though I might swing by to reprogram your lounge machine to play jazz. That would be considered sabotage. Only if it's bad jazz. Rilu offered no reply, but his upper left eye twitched slightly, a gesture Grant had learned to interpret as reluctant amusement. Before stepping into the lift, Grant turned one last time. You ever get another human in here, Doc, and they start cracking jokes while bleeding out? Don't be surprised. I will prepare accordingly. Just don't try to outjoke them. I do not intend to. The lift closed. Rilu remained still for a long moment, then returned to the medical wing. He entered his office, sat at his console, and opened a new research entry. Title: Adaptive Humor and Cognitive Resilience in Terran Patients. He began typing. Observed subject utilized humor as a multi-layered coping mechanism during severe physical trauma and extended recovery. Functioned as both internalized pain modulation and external social signal to reduce perceived vulnerability. Cognitive recovery accelerated under conditions of task engagement and metaphorical reframing. Subject demonstrated consistent pattern of defiance toward physical limitation through controlled exposure and memory integration. Humor functioned not merely as distraction but as adaptive resistance. He paused, then added, further study recommended. Not for clinical protocol, just curiosity. He closed the file. In the corridor, the sanitation unit hummed softly, now playing something that suspiciously resembled a Terran saxophone. Rilu stared at it for a moment, then left it alone.